I've just finished the first 48 pages of this book in about an hour and 15 minutes, and this is an absolute masterclass. Um, the first couple chapters kind of just go into the difference between instinct, intellect, and intuition, and how in the Western culture the intellect is so predominant, and we teach everyone to be very efficient and to fit into a role in society at the neglect of the spiritual side of things. As to where in the East, the spiritual side to the top members of society, to the Brahmin class, to those who are capable of embodying it, the spiritual side of the education process is very strong. But then for the masses, they're kind of just left out to dry, and there's not that material efficiency. There's a lot of poverty. They're kind of neglected there because the spiritual side is so emphasized, and the materialistic efficiency of the West isn't as prevalent. And Alice Bailey explains that in the synthesis of these two approaches is where the next level of education essentially lies. This is an idea I'm well familiar with. As some of you know, I'm a devotee of the great master Paramahansa Yogananda. And this is something, I've loved everything about his teachings, but this is something that has always stuck with me, of the coming together of the East and the West. So it's great to hear that again from a bit of a different angle, and just cement that understanding, and also kind of understand that that's what my purpose really is I'm somebody who has the capacity to synthesize both of these aspects of the more Western efficiency and science with the Eastern meditative contemplation practice. And I know something powerful is going to come about from synthesizing those perspectives. Of course, what we need in the West is more of that intuitive Eastern meditative understanding, because that's what's lacking here. And that's what I kind of focus on in my spiritual group that I run, the Oasis. Check the description if you're interested in working with me, because that's really what my purpose is. And I'm just striving to bring about this understanding through these videos, and in whatever way I can. I'm sure it's going to be interesting to see how this path unfolds for me, and for the collective as a whole. And now, one of the recommendations in this chapter was that everybody should try and come up with their own definition of what education means to them. So I'm going to read you what I wrote. And of course, this was influenced by what I just read. But at the same time, I feel like this has been my understanding. It's been, before I even got into the spiritual path, it was always upsetting to me how the education system is run in the West, how it caters to the lowest common denominator, how they don't teach life skills, they don't teach wisdom, they teach an accumulation of facts. And it's so frustrating once you see that, how lacking in this 21st century, how ignorant we still are in what we're teaching our children. And just, this is what we need. We gotta bring this Eastern perspective into our education system and cater to each individual. So let me go ahead and read you some of what I wrote here. Maybe I'll just read a couple points, because there's a lot on this page. Education is providing the tools and the knowledge that will facilitate an individual's ability to ascertain the deepest truths. Education is training for life. It is not the memorization of facts or the accumulation of knowledge. True education results in wisdom. True education is direct inquiry into the nature of reality. Knowledge, facts, and information are only stepping stones. They may lead us to the door, but they cannot open it. And then I wrote at the bottom, effective education must encourage experimentation and exploration. Meditation is a very effective means of self-education, as in that stillness, connection to one's intuitive capacity is cultivated, and in time, perception of truth is bestowed. I'd never really quite made that connection that meditation is a form of education. In hindsight, of course it is. That's where you're learning the deepest truths about yourself and the universe. But like, education's usually like in the West, it's just so ingrained that, oh, this is facts and reading books. That's what education is. No, meditation is actually the highest form of education. And that was a great insight I just got from reading this book. And of course, it makes sense. That's where I've learned the most about what reality is really comprised of. But anyway, I've talked for long enough here. I'm going to take a quick break probably and then get back to reading. So keep you posted. I'm now about a third of the way through this book, and it's a really inspiring explanation of meditation and the spiritual process. She gives a lot of examples, the author, of things that Christ said, things that professors from India or saints said that describe the process of essentially awakening. She doesn't call it that, but just the process of becoming aware of one's nature as a child of God, of seeing oneself in that light, and the illumination that takes place, the just oneness that takes place, the transmutation of all the instinctual urges and all of the senses to their higher expression. And, she explains that meditation is ultimately the way to get to that place. And also, but it's not just meditation, it's also living in balance, living in a state of service to God. That's what gets one to the highest state. And, I think reading this to me has just had the effect of reminding myself again to just give myself fully up to that process, meditate as much as I can, be of service as much as I can, and kind of just drop all of those things that aren't meant for me. But, it's a years and years long process, right? And I've fallen into the other extreme of like being really hard on myself if I'm not being perfect in that pursuit. And that's not the way to do it either. We just gotta have that conviction that we're not going to give up. And she also makes a distinction here between prayer and meditation. And has the idea that sort of there's a few stages of prayer. There's praying for like material goods or like just circumstances in life. There's then praying for virtues and things like that. And then there's a third stage, I can't quite remember. But the fourth stage is like praying for spiritual unfoldment, praying for illumination. And that stage of prayer kind of sets the stage. That's where prayer turns into true meditation, is at that stage where it's a science of direct perception of God. And basically she says if a man is willing to just follow these steps and go along with the process, it's guaranteed that the illumination is going to happen. But you have to be very disciplined and very willing to give up the things of the ego and really put yourself fully into that process, which obviously is a big commitment. But it's like, and she said, like, you got to become aware of, like, read the stories of the saints and the thousands of people who have done this and have a clear understanding both of where you're at, what your virtues are, and what obstacles stand in your way, and have also a clear understanding of what the benefits are going to be, just how much of a more clear perception and joy you're going to feel once this heavy sort of veil is lifted. I'll leave it there, but in all honesty, guys, this is the first time in this reading challenge that I haven't been sure if I'm going to complete it, because it's already pretty late into the afternoon here. I did a workout and I had a seminar this morning, and it's around 6 p.m. I think, and I'm only about a third of the way through, but I'm going to try and keep pushing. I think what I'm going to do is I'm inspired to meditate for a little bit after reading this, as I usually do each evening, and then I'm going to go read off camera and ice my shoulders for a bit because my shoulders are really sore after working out. So I'll keep you updated, and let's see if I'm able to finish this today. I mean, even if I don't, the book I'm going to read tomorrow is really short, so I could still probably maybe do 7 books in 7 days, or only the real ones are watching at this point anyways. So if I don't complete the challenge, you'll just see the reality that, hey, I gave it my all and I wasn't quite able to complete it. But no matter what, I'm going to keep going for 7 days here and read as much as I can. But hopefully I'll get a renewed sense of energy and finish this out. So I will see you on the next update. All right, everyone. It's currently 9:30 p.m. and I'm 145 pages into this 262-page book. And I do plan on trying to power through this tonight. I had a cup of coffee a couple hours ago, so I think I just about got the energy to finish through. But what I'm experiencing is a desire. This is a book that I really want to take the time to. I would like to, if I wasn't doing this challenge, take the time to really sit with things and contemplate these kind of deep spiritual truths that are being touched upon on this book. I just read so much about meditation and contemplation. She uses a lot of examples of what Patanjali said in his Yoga Sutras, which I really like, as well as Meister Eckhart, who I actually want to read his work because I've seen him referenced in a lot of spiritual texts, and it's always very profound what he has to say. But it's hard for me even right now to summarize what I've read, because I feel the pressure to finish this book to kind of speed through it and not highlight and take as many notes as I normally would. For the first third of this, you guys saw I was going in depth. I was taking my time, and that's why I only got through a third of the book, up until 6:30 p.m. I think it was. What do I want to bring out here? She's just explaining, she's been explaining the stages of meditation, and just how the first stage is concentration, and that's what a lot of beginners should really, really focus on getting down. both concentrating on something within meditation, a concentration exercise, and just bringing that concentration into every aspect of what you do in your daily life. That's the prerequisite for real meditation, because real meditation requires one pointedness of the mind. So your concentration practice and your concentration, applying that to daily life, is your way to improve that ability. And it's also the way to just like, you need to live your life in a certain way to gain mastery over the mind. That's step one. And then you kind of develop that connection between the mind and the brain and make that distinction. The brain is just the physical operating system, for lack of a better word, of the mind. I don't even think that analogy is quite right, but you get what I'm saying. It's just like, okay, like just like the body is the vessel for spirit, the brain is the vessel for the mind. And by kind of like just right habits, you kind of clear that out and develop that connection. And then you develop, in the deeper stages of meditation, you get into the stage of contemplation, she calls it, as well as Patanjali calls it contemplation as well, where you are now, the prior stages of meditation were done through the mind. You know, it was through the ego. I wouldn't say through the ego, but through the personal self, in a sense of really concentrating and focusing one's energy in a certain direction. And where contemplation, this higher stage of meditation, is more, now that you're one pointed, it's now about being receptive and allowing divine truth to flow to you, essentially. Because it's and she explains, it's the soul. Now you're in contact with the soul, and it's the soul that does contemplation. So that's most of what I've taken away from up till page 145 so far. And I'm going to continue on through the rest of the book. However, I am going to make a slight change here to the rest of the challenge. I'm still going to go for 7 days. I'm still going to continue. But I'm going to make a change because I have a feeling that if I just continue to push through and read all these books, I'm not going to, these last couple books here, you know, I'm probably going to be pretty fatigued, and I'm not going to remember a lot of what I've read. And like this, the living classroom, the act of will, like these topics I kind of want to be able to sit with and take my time to work through them so that I really digest the information I'm reading. So here's what I'm going to do. Amusing Ourselves to Death. This is still going to be the book for tomorrow. I'm going to read the whole thing. Tomorrow is Saturday. Sunday, Body-Centered Psychotherapy. Going to read through this whole book. This one's going to be a bit of a challenge. These words, it's only, I think, just under 200 pages. Actually, just over 200 pages, 201. But the text is very small, so this will probably be another challenging one. But I've been excited to read this book for a while, the Hakomi method, and getting into, there's some tension stored in my body that I want to really work through, and I think this is a great approach to do so. And then here's what I'm going to do. These two books were taken out of the equation. By the time I'm done with, hopefully you guys can see this in the frame, but by the time I'm done with these two, that'll have to be day 5 done. And then what we're going to do is bring in this book here, Healing Developmental Trauma. I'm already over halfway through this book. This is the book I was reading, and it's very dense. It's over 300 pages and small words on the page. But I'm already over halfway through it. This was the book I was reading, and it's a very good book too, before I started this challenge, and I didn't finish it. So day 6, I'm going to finish this book is what I'm going to do. Or maybe I'll do it day 5 and do this one day 6. We'll see how I'm feeling. But these two are going to be day 5 and 6. And then day 7, I'm going to write an essay summarizing all of my thoughts and experiences with this challenge, as well as giving a summary of all the books to let you know how I like them, and just to also see how well I can remember and retain all this information that I've been taking in so quickly. And if you want to see that essay, that'll be on my Substack, which you can subscribe to in the description. But yeah, that's the plan going forward. So just wanted to give you that update and Now I'm going to try and knock out the rest of this book with that little caffeine boost. It's been about 2 hours since I had that cup of coffee. It's now 9:30 p.m. So we'll see if I can finish this book before midnight. And I'm gonna stop myself from I feel like really taking the time I want to and taking the notes I want to, because I gotta just finish this book for the challenge. So, but I'm still getting a lot out of this, and this is so far it's a very excellent book, and I would recommend it for anybody who's interested in meditation. I'd highly recommend this, and just cultivating your intuition in general, really. She pulls from a lot of excellent sources to kind of strengthen her viewpoint and really drive the points home. And it's very much in alignment with my spiritual path, with the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It's very much in alignment with his teachings, which I really enjoy. And, it's kind of almost strengthening my understanding of this path of meditation. So, going to continue with this, and I'll see you in a bit. It's currently 12:23 a.m. and I've just finished From Intellect to Intuition, and what an experience it was reading this book in one day over the course of 8 to 10 hours or so, I would guess. It's a very good book overall and a very good explanation of meditation, I'd say, if you want to get into this and really develop your intuition and your connection with the divine. There are a lot of things, even myself being very experienced with meditation, that were useful, either reminders or, kind of just not new perspectives, not things I haven't heard before from the teachings I've studied, but it's always useful to be reminded of these things to strengthen our understanding. Maybe hearing it in a different way will, in my opinion, kind of integrating these perspectives will create new understandings and kind of bridges. You can probably tell I'm pretty exhausted. I'm mentally and physically exhausted, but my soul is wide awake from reading this work. So, yeah, I think the takeaways I'm going to take from it are, for a beginner in meditation, there's definitely a lot that's going to be useful in here. But the takeaways for me are to not get too fervorish and too emotional about the devotional aspect of the path, and to not really want to, because, it can be fulfilling to feel that joy, to even like come to the point of tears in meditation, to feel that uplifting emotion. But when you get, and that can even be good at first, it can be good to have those experiences, but Bailey makes it clear, and other teachings I've read, that if you like get too emotional and too sucked into that, you're not going to hit the higher level of illumination in the end. And she also makes it clear that really what you got to focus on is your concentration at first, right? I think I already said this in the kind of previous video I recorded. She touches even more on that. But yeah, and saying that kind of like sometimes the more wisdom aspect, or just the more getting past the emotions, like really getting to that point of illumination in the contemplation stage of meditation, is kind of not talked about. And that's the difference between like a mystic and a knower. As she says, a mystic is kind of like in that devotional aspect, constantly wanting to commune with God, but then comes back down and kind of feels more disappointed, to where the knower sees and has divine perception in everything, right? The one thing I would say is there was a part of the meditation advice, most of it was pretty good. There was a part I don't necessarily, like, I really don't think it's very good advice. And that was when she went into how to practice meditation, she suggested that you visualize the three lower bodies, the mental, emotional, and physical nature, and visualize that communing with the higher spirit. And I can see why she says that. But you're already identified most likely with this lower nature. There's no need to visualize that. That's what we want to forget when we're meditating. So if you read this book, I'd say take that with a grain of salt. What you really want to focus on in the concentration practice is just focusing on the inflowing and outflowing breath naturally is a great concentration exercise. Or just focus here on the point between the eyebrows at the spiritual eye, another great concentration exercise. There's absolutely no need to visualize the three bodies of your lower emotional nature. That kind of just had me scratching my head. But like overall, the book was incredibly excellent, and there's a lot of good insights in there. If you want to learn meditation, check out my Oasis group, or just check out my YouTube videos. I have a very good understanding of meditation, as I've learned from my guru, Paramahansa Yogananda. Also, research his work, look up from the Self-Realization Fellowship or from Ananda how to practice meditation, order those teachings, SRF lessons. I got them right down here. You can probably see them. If you're really particularly interested, you're not going to go wrong with this line of gurus. But follow your intuition and wherever that takes you. I think I'm kind of like too tired to go into everything else or remember everything else I learned. It was really overwhelming. I'd recommend, if you want to read this book, I'd highly recommend it, but read it over the course of a week or two. Don't read it in one day. Like I did. This probably wasn't the best book to choose for this experiment. But nonetheless, I'm glad I read it and I got some useful insights. She's pretty good about like the meditation posture. She has correct. And I think the useful point is like keeping the chin parallel to the ground or turning it down a bit, because she mentions that, which is true for me sometimes. I'll open my eyes and I'll find that my chin's just a little bit upturned. I want to start it parallel to the ground, but it just goes up a little bit. And, she mentioned this is a minor point in the book, but it just came to mind that, that's a common thing and you want to avoid that because that can just create tension in the neck. And she also mentioned, she suggested that you cross your feet if you're like sitting in a chair, meditating in upright posture, that you cross your feet, and that doesn't seem very practical to me. She says it creates a closed loop, but there's absolutely no problem with just keeping your feet. Just in case anyone here ends up reading this, I want to give you proper meditation advice too. It's fine to just keep your feet flat on the floor. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to take away from like how profound this book was, just how many she really goes into the part I just read as well, like the parts I just read of what the divine illumination experience consisted of. And I wanted to mention, and towards the end of the book, there's a very good kind of set of warnings and traps that you can fall into as a meditator and as a spiritual speaker, including falling into false visions, getting overstimulated with all the energy that's coming in by practicing violent breathing exercises. Now, I do want to mention Kriya Yoga is taught by Paramahansa Yogananda. I'm not qualified to teach that. You'll have to go through a process through one of the organizations to be able to learn that. But that breathing exercise is not dangerous at all and is completely safe to practice. And I don't know if I agree with Foley. She kind of like has a thing like against a lot of breathing exercises. There is a lot of dangerous exercises out there, but there's also some that are completely safe to practice. So I think she was maybe a little too condescending about those, but overall very good. Highly recommend it. One of my favorite books I've read in a while, and I'll probably come back to this at some point and read through it at a slower pace, especially the second half, which I kind of just had to power through it here for this challenge. But without further ado, I'm going to be reading Amusing Ourselves to Death tomorrow. So I'll see you there.